For the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine more than 5 months ago, a ship carrying grain has left the port of Odesa under a landmark deal between these two warring sides. Now, Ukraine has hailed the ship's departure as a relief for the world amid a worsening food crisis. The Kremlin called it very positive news. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has also welcomed the development. The first ship is loaded with 26,000 tons of corn and is bound for Lebanon. This was made possible in a deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations. It's a delicate operation, though. The ship needs to be guided safely through the mined waters of the Black Sea. It will then undergo an inspection in Istanbul, that's tomorrow, before continuing on to Lebanon.
بصراحة في عندي تخوف من كونه في ألغام مثل ما بتعرفي في ألغام بالبحر، فبنتمنى انه نحن هلا تقريبا بدنا شي ساعتين حتى نطلع برا المياه الإقليمية لأوكرانيا، تقريبا ساعتين ثلاثة. بتمنى انه ما يصير معنا شيء او يصير في خطأ معنا. هذا أكثر شيء يعني بخوفني بالرحلة. اما باقي الامور متعودين عليها نحن كاشخاص بنعمل بالبحر.
Ukraine is one of the world's key suppliers of grain, and Russia's blockade is threatening multiple famines. Another 16 vessels with nearly 600,000 tons of grain awaiting their turn. Some 20 million tons of grain has been stuck in Ukrainian ports as a result of this war. Rosie Bircher joins us live now from Brussels for more on this. Rosie, this is a momentous breakthrough for Ukrainian grain shipments. What's the reaction in Europe been to this?
Well, it's been such a long and winding road to get here. On the one hand, tens of millions of tons of grain trapped inside Ukraine. On the other hand, we had the United Nations warning that the fallout of the conflict in Ukraine was threatening tens of millions of people with food insecurity and hunger. Now, officials here in Brussels have welcomed the news of this first commercial ship departing from Ukraine filled with corn. NATO, for example, the Defensive Alliance, its Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has welcomed this. He's particularly highlighted and lauded the role played by Turkey, one NATO ally, in brokering this landmark deal, which was brokered earlier in July and now coming into play. As for the European Union, the EU has not been directly involved in making this deal happen, rather sitting on the sidelines trying to find alternative ways to export Ukrainian grains, for example, by land, rail or river routes. But those proved simply insufficient to get these tens of millions of tons of grain out. And that's why EU officials are certainly breathing a sigh of relief. Now, I asked European Commission spokesperson Peter Stano specifically about this. Here's what he had to say.
This is a welcome first step towards mitigating the global food crisis, which was enhanced by Russia's illegitimate aggression and blockage of aggression against Ukraine, blockage of Ukrainian ports, in addition to mining, destroying the fields in Ukraine, destroying the silos in Ukraine, burning the grain and wheat, or looting and trying to sell it on behalf of Russia. So this is very important and very welcome first step, and we look forward to the implementation of the whole deal.
So while Russia has blamed this unfolding global food crisis on Western sanctions and on those Ukrainian mines at sea, as we heard from Peter Stano there, the European Union says the blame for this food crisis lies squarely with Moscow.
Rosie, it is welcome news that this deal has held, but how far is it going to help to bring down global food prices?
Well, absolutely. As I said, officials here in Brussels are breathing a sigh of relief, but they're also in many ways holding their breath to see to what extent this deal will continue to be implemented. Now, this deal, when it was signed in Istanbul in July, was seen as very fragile, and that fragility was seen just one day later when Russia attacked a Ukrainian port. Now, at that time, there were fears the deal may be simply dead on arrival. But what we've seen today with this departure of this first ship is that the deal is, in fact, alive and well. Now, those first shipments will be headed for Lebanon, a country which is embroiled in a financial crisis which is only only been worsened by the fallout of this conflict in Ukraine, a place that's very much reliant on Ukraine for its food exports. Let's not forget Ukraine is the #1 supplier of agricultural exports to North Africa as a whole. So certainly the officials in those countries also waiting anxiously to see when these shipments will arrive, with food prices skyrocketing. This, in theory, should ease that a little bit, with more certainty about Ukrainian grains now being able to be exported. But of course, the big question mark is, will Russia hold up its end of the bargain? And certainly within some European Union countries, there is a degree of scepticism about that. For example, Estonia has warned that any deals with Russia should be treated with a great degree of scepticism, a country which, of course, has a long experience with Russia, a Baltic nation, which has from the start warned against doing any sort of deals with Moscow, though we have, of course, heard Moscow welcoming this move today.
There may still be some anxious days ahead. Rosie, thank you very much for that. Rosie Burchard there reporting from Brussels.